Hello boys and girls, it's good to have you here. This video is going to give you a very brief introduction to how to write a letter of complaint. So when we talk about a letter of complaint, there are a few questions that we would like to ask. For example, we want to ask why do we have to write a complaint letter? Question number two, what about a formal register? So if a complaint letter is a formal letter, then what does it mean by a formal register, a formal tone? Question number three, what about the format? In other words, what is the correct structure? What is the proper format and structure anyway? And the next question, well, if I want to make my complaint more convincing, more persuasive, how can we do it? How can we make the complaint more persuasive, especially with the use of more effective language? Any recommendations? So these are the questions that we will use to present this video. So let us go into the first question. Why complaint letter? Why do we write a complaint letter? Well, to put it simply, we want to write a complaint letter because we want to make a formal complaint. What it means is that, well, usually if you are not happy with anything, what you have to do is just to say, well, I'm not happy about it, and you just say it to your friend or to your classmates. You don't really have to write a complaint letter. Then when we have to write a complaint letter, we want to make a really formal complaint. To whom? Well, of course, to the head of the department, to the head of a company, to the head of an organization, to a shop. So it can be to a manager, it can be to anybody in charge of that organization. So that's another thing that we have to know about a complaint letter. And thirdly, a complaint letter is usually about a product, a service, or the environment. So you may not be happy with things that you have bought. You may not be happy with the people who serve you in a shop. So that is the reason why you may want to write a complaint letter. And of course, the last thing that marks a complaint letter is that you always expect follow-up questions when you write a complaint letter. You write a letter because you look forward to having some follow-up actions. Maybe a refund, maybe, well, some sort of improvement by the company. So next, number two, and so because it's a formal letter, how can we write with a formal tone, a formal register? Now here are two tips for you. First of all, try to avoid any sort of short forms. Short forms like I'm, it. So instead of using I'm, you better write I am. Instead of saying is, you better say it is or it was. Instead of saying is, you better say it is or it has. Alright, so that's the first thing you need to pay attention to. Another thing is that you try to get rid of all kinds of informal punctuations. Informal punctuations including exclamation marks and all the dots. Of course, you want to also get rid of informal words such as oh, wow, things like that. That is how we write a formal letter with a formal tone. Now moving on to the third question, which is a key question, the central question here. How do we write it properly, and what is the proper format or the structure? How can we form a letter? How does it look like, in other words? Well, it looks something like this. I'm dividing the letter, this complaint letter, into two parts. This is part one, so you may want to look at that here. And let's start from the very beginning. A complaint letter always starts with the recipient of the letter But in most cases, you won't have any idea of the name of the recipient, and very likely you want to start instead with Dear Sir, Dear Madam, Dear Sir, stroke, Madam, comma. Mind you, right here, you see, you should always start Dear Sir, Madam with a capital S and capital M. Never use a small letter here. So you always start with Dear Sir or Madam, comma, because you won't have any idea of the name of the recipient. Now, moving on to the first paragraph. In the first paragraph, you want to put down the reason for your writing. So in this case, in this example, you say, I am writing. Well, remember, do not say I am, say I am. I am writing to complain about the service I received in your supermarket last week. So obviously, I'm not very happy with the thing that happened to me last week in the supermarket, and therefore I am writing to complain about the service I received, past tense of course, because it happened last week. I received in your supermarket last week. So in other words, you find things such as the purpose. The thing is the service, and then another thing is the place, and the third piece of information that you need to give is the time, the exact date and time. So the three elements should be seen in paragraph 1 for the reason for this letter. Now, moving on to the first paragraph, the next paragraph, and well, very likely it's about the first complaint. So you see, we move on to paragraph 2, and we start by saying firstly, because it's my first complaint. And on the left hand side right here, you see that your first complaint is about the staff being rude and not being very helpful, and that's how you can phrase it. Firstly, I was unable to find the pet goods section, so I asked one of your staff to help me. Instead of showing me to the right place, he simply shrugged and walked away. So that's the first thing that got me so angry, because I was trying to look for a certain section, but the staff simply walked away, ignored me, shrugging his shoulders without taking care of my needs. So that is why I wanted to complain about his rude attitude. So you see, the whole paragraph centers on one thing, and that is the attitude of the helper, the staff there. And of course, you want to describe the detail there, especially in this case, saying that, well, he simply shrugged and walked away. So you give a little more description about what made you so unhappy. Okay, so moving on to the next paragraph, paragraph 3, which is the second complaint, my second reason for writing this letter. Then, after standing in the queue at the checkout for over 15 minutes, I reached the end only to be told by the cashier that her shift was over and I would have to join another queue. So I was very unhappy because I was told that I should join another queue, but it was actually my turn, and the reason given to me was that the cashier had her shift over. Her shift was over, and she had to take a break maybe, and I was not very happy about it, because it's my turn. It's supposed to be my turn to pay for the goods. So if you look at the details there, so this complaint is about the queue for the checkout, and I gave also the exact period, duration, the length of time that I spent in the queue, which is 15 minutes. And then the cashier told me, however, that her shift was over and I would have to join another queue. So that's another thing. That's the second complaint, and that's the first part of my complaint letter. Now, moving on to part two, my last complaint. And you see, I'm using a very special phrase here as if that was not bad enough. So that's my final complaint. You know, what happened to me was already quite bad and shocking, but as if that was not bad enough. When I finally managed to pay for my groceries, the cashier overcharged me. However, when I pointed out her mistake, she did not apologize, but she was rude and unfriendly. So she made a mistake, but she refused to say sorry to me, the client, the customer. And that is why you can imagine how unhappy I was and how mad I was. So if you look up here, you will realize that this final complaint includes the cashier overcharging me, and another fact is that she refused to say sorry, to apologize to me for her mistake, and that is my third complaint. So after detailing on the three complaints, now moving on to the conclusion. In the conclusion, you always want to show that you are upset, and you want to say what you expect from the person that you are complaining about. So let's look at the main paragraph here. As you can imagine, I was extremely upset by the treatment I received, and I will certainly not be shopping in your supermarket anymore. And I hope that you will improve your staff training methods, and that your staff will be more polite and helpful to customers from now on. So if you look at it more carefully, you'll find that first thing you want to express how unhappy you were. All right, so it's more about your feeling, your emotion. And then another thing is that you want to say that the action that you are taking, in other words, in this case, you have decided not to be shopping in that supermarket again. And then you are also saying what you expect from the company, from the supermarket. So what you're requesting here is that you want them to improve their staff training methods so that their staff can be more polite. All right. Now, if you look at the right-hand side, so if you simply say that we want you to improve, I want you to improve, that is not good. You always give details like who, who is that, or what are you expecting. So when you go back to the sample here, you start by saying I was, and I received, and I will, and I hope. So you're giving very details from your very personal point of view. All right. Now, finally, there is one thing that you should not miss, and that is, let me just highlight it in yellow, this part. Okay. So first of all, because you start with your dear sir or madam, comma, you always close your letter with yours faithfully, followed by a signature and then your full name, in this case Mavis Edwards. All right, so all the three parts should be here in the closing, with the yours faithfully, comma, and then your signature, and then your name in full. That's what we call a complete complimentary closing. All right, spell your words carefully. It should be yours faithfully. So be very careful with the common mistake here. Be very careful with it. Yours faithfully. All right, and also with the capital letters and the small letters. If you look at my sample again, it should be yours with capital Y, and then yours, and then small letter F. That is the right way to do it. Everybody all right? So we'll be moving on to the next part. Let's focus now on the language side. After talking about the format, the structure, and the formal tone, the whole layout and everything, let us move on to the language itself. There are two tips that I'm giving you here. First of all, you need to be descriptive, giving details. I think that the sample that I shared with you just now has shown that it's very important to give details about the staff, service, and the product, and what they said, and what they did, or what they forgot to do, how long was I in the queue for 15 minutes. So you want to give all the details to make your writing and to make your complaint more persuasive. Well, of course, that's the point, to make it very persuasive, so that, well, the person who reads your letter will be convinced that the complaint is a serious one. Another tip that I'm giving you here is that you want to use vivid verbs, adjectives, or adverbs. Well, how can we do it? Let's look at the example. Look at this. I got you another example here, and if you look very carefully, you can stop the video now and you study the wordings, and you shall realize that actually there are a number of adjectives and verbs and nouns there that try to describe the details of the whole incident, all right, of the whole experience. Quite nice, actually. But you know what? There is one more thing that you can do to improve the effectiveness of your complaint letter, to make it more convincing. Well, how? Well, if you just look at it, you will see that actually you can do a little bit more. Come on. For example, instead of just saying the service, you can say the appalling service, the shocking, terrible service in a restaurant. So you add an adjective there to make it more convincing. Now, another thing that you can do is this. Clumsy, yes, it was clumsy. The waiter was clumsy, but you may want to add more weight to it by saying that the waiter was incredibly, extremely clumsy. And then she was burned. All right, I mean, my wife was burned by the hot soup because the soup was hot, because the soup was very hot, and my wife was badly burned. And she screamed, but the waiter just laughed, and she laughed, and the waiter laughed nastily. And his behavior was not just bad, it was terrible, it was unbelievable, it was appalling. So on and so forth. What you need to do is trying to make it sound more convincing, more vivid here and there. All right, so try to do it in your writing. Now I'm coming to the final few slides of the PowerPoint now. Here are just some more examples how you may make your complaints stronger and stronger. For example, on the left-hand side, you see, I feel I must complain about, well, that sounds a little bit too weak actually. But if you look at the right-hand side here, you find that this is way better. I must express my great dissatisfaction with the service, with the product, with whatever there is. Okay, I must express my great dissatisfaction with that. So you see the mild version on the left hand side and the stronger version on the right hand side. If you go through this table, you will find that there are different ways you can make your complaints more convincing. I strongly recommend, and the whole experience was thoroughly disappointing, completely disappointing. I must say that the service was unacceptable. I strongly recommend, otherwise, or else I can assure you that I will be taking my business elsewhere. So these are some, little tricks that you want to do to make your letter more convincing. All right. Now, here are some final reminders after covering my previous slides, and here are a few. reminders, a quick summary. First, make sure that you use a formal tone there. The tone should be formal. The way you use not using the short forms, not using the informal punctuations. The second thing, well, of course, the whole organization should follow that pattern, that structure, and it has to be logical. There's no doubt about it. And never forget that you are expected to give details. Detailed description is extremely important to make your complaint more convincing. The last bit, of course, I just spent a few minutes talking about how you can make your language more persuasive, more powerful, more convincing. And then, of course, how you end, how you close your letter, yours faithfully, the signature, and then your name in full. And of course, do not forget to proofread it. Proofreading is always crucial. Whatever you write, you need to proofread it to get rid of the silly, careless mistakes. Now, here is the situation. This is for your next composition. Situation. You had a meal in a restaurant. However, you did not enjoy your meal due to a number of problems. Write a letter of complaint to the manager of the restaurant and write about 350 words. Now, in your letter, include 3 complaints and the justifications to support them. Give suggestions in your letter on how the restaurant could improve their food and service. So go through that again and you will realize that this time it's about a meal, all right, in a restaurant. So make sure you know the background, the situation, and you did not enjoy your meal due to a number of problems. So you have to write a letter not to anybody but the manager of the restaurant. So you can start with dear sir or madam, comma. Now, of course, there are very specific requirements in the topic that you need to include 3 complaints, and also, of course, the description and the explanation of the 3 complaints. It can be about the food, can be about the service, and can be about the environment and everything. Use your imagination to create the background story there. And don't forget, there is one more thing that you have to cover, and that is, of course, the suggestions. Give suggestions at the end of the letter. All right. So these are a few things that you have to deal with in your letter. Now, my final slide. I hope the following tips will give you some direction how to write this letter. Pay very close attention, boys and girls. So here are some useful ideas. On the left hand side, let's start from the blue one. Let's start with the complaint. So what can the complaints be all about? Well, maybe you want to start with talking about the salad. Maybe this problem is the salad. You can talk about the vegetables or the soup or the steak, whatever food. Whatever problem with the food, with the dishes. All right. So this is one possible direction. But of course, you can talk about the surface or the environment. For example, the air conditioning, the lighting, the background music in the restaurant, or the service, the attitude, the behavior of the staff, the waiters, all right, or the cook, if you like. So there are many different choices for you to choose from. So you have to decide when you are brainstorming, doing the mind map, planning for this complaint letter. Try to narrow it down to 3 areas only, 3 major problems. So I'm providing you with too many options here. So be selective, choose 3 problems that you would like to focus on. And of course, after narrowing it down to 3 problems, the next part in your planning is that you need to give an explanation or the detailed description. Say you want to talk about the vegetables being unwashed and giving detail, you may want to move on to say that, well, there are pieces of dirt, there are bugs found on the lettuce leaves, if you want to show and to explain how the vegetables had not been washed properly. Or if your complaint is about the waiter, the service, then you may want to talk about the waiter saying something silly, telling lies, or saying something really rude, all right, misbehaving to your complaint. All right, so that's the justification, the explanation, the description of your complaints. Finally, the last paragraph. So what are you suggesting? So here are some ideas. Will you be suggesting better management? Will you be suggesting that they retrain their staff? Will you be suggesting that you want an apology, a written apology? Or are you expecting a refund, having your money back? Or, well, if in a very serious case, are you asking them to fire that waiter, that staff member of their restaurant? So there are different options, and once again, you have to make sense, use your head, and think very carefully the most proper, suggestions in response to your complaints, the problems that you raised. All right, boys and girls, so that is the end of this PowerPoint presentation of this video. I hope it helps by giving you a general idea how to write a complaint letter. Feel free to go back to the beginning of the clip or any point of this video to take a very more careful look at the sample and the examples I have given you here. All right, enjoy writing and have a good time. I'll see you soon, and I look forward to reading your marvelous writing. Bye bye.